I should have known something was up when the bodacious blonde from marketing Candy started coming onto me hard. Don't get me wrong, I'm a decent-looking guy, fit, tall, full head of hair. But this woman was a straight-up MILF. Like Stifler's mom meets Pamela Anderson hot. Anyway, one day Candy sauntered up and was like, "Hey there, Justin, you me dinner tonight." I nearly choked on my protein bar. "You mean like a date?" She smirked. "Well, it doesn't have to be a date unless you want it to be." She gave me a slow wink and sashayed off, leaving me stunned. "Look, I have a thing for older women, no shame in that, so you can bet your sweet ass I said yes. We ended up going way past dinner, if you know what I mean. That's how my torrid affair with the sexy, mysterious Candy began. For months, it was just mind-blowing sex whenever and wherever we could sneak it in. She'd whisper the filthiest things in my ear, driving me wild. I didn't know jack about her personal life, which turned out to be a real fucking problem. One night, Candy and I were going at it hot and heavy on her living room couch. You know the drill, clothes scattered everywhere, her nails raking down my back as I pounded into her from behind. We were both moaning and grunting like animals. That's when I heard the front door burst open. What the F? I whipped my head around to see some ripped, half-Japanese Adonis standing there, jaw on the floor. Before I could even process the situation, Candy screamed, "Toshi, you're home early." My stomach dropped. This Greek god of a man was her husband, the one she conveniently forgot to mention in our 6 months together. The dude's Tashi, I guess. Looked like I just killed his puppy. The shock and betrayal on his face, man, it killed me too in that moment. He and Candy immediately started screaming at each other in some combination of English and Japanese. She was pleading with him not to leave her, crying about how she was sorry and it was a mistake. He wasn't having it. I had never felt so low. Here I was, bare-ass naked, caught doing the dirtiest deed with this guy's wife. A guy who seemed like a freaking prince compared to my jackass self. Somehow, I managed to gather my clothes and get the hell out of there. He bolted from their place like my ass was on fire, desperately trying to outrun the burning shame. The next few days were rough. I replayed that nightmarish scenario over and over, haunted by Toshi's devastated face. How could I, a supposed good guy with values, have willingly done that to someone? I knew I had to make things right. Well, as right as I possibly could after pulling such a low-life move. I resigned myself to the fact that Toshi probably wanted to pummel my face into the pavement. Can't say I wouldn't have felt the same in his shoes. With a sinking feeling, I tracked down their address and showed up on their doorstep a week later. I practically had to choke down vomit as I rang the bell. When Toshi answered, his expression was pure thunder. "Look, man, I know I'm the last person you want to see right now," I started. But I had no idea Candy was married, I swear. If I knew, I never would have. Toshi stopped me with a raised palm, his jaw clenched tight. "Save it. Just tell me what you want so you can get the hell away from my house." Hearing such malice in his voice crushed me. I deserved it. But damn. I just wanted to apologize, man, from the bottom of my heart. What I did was unforgivable, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. You didn't deserve that. To my surprise, some of the tension left Toshi's face. With a weary sigh, he opened the door wider. "Get in here, kid." I must have looked as confused as I felt when Toshi gestured for me to come inside. But I knew better than to question it, and followed him into the living room. An awkward silence stretched between us as I took a seat. Toshi raked a hand through his spiky black hair, seeming to mull over his words carefully. Finally, he spoke up. "Look, you're an asshole for what you did, no getting around that." I nodded, bracing myself for whatever insult was coming next. But then he said something I never expected. "But you're not the only asshole here. Candy, she's been checked out of our marriage for a long time. The lies, the cheating, the disrespect." He shook his head bitterly. "I probably should have ended things a while ago." It was like the rug had been pulled out from under me. Suddenly, a relationship I had wrecked so selfishly had already been wrecked from the inside out. The sick feeling of guilt turned to a swirling confusion in the pit of my stomach. As if reading my mind, Toshi locked eyes with me. "Don't get me wrong, I'm still pissed as hell at you. But maybe I've been misdirecting my anger at the wrong person this whole time." I didn't know what to say. What could I possibly say? This whole situation was getting twisted in ways I couldn't make sense of. "I think," Toshi began, then hesitated. A rueful half-smile played across his lips. "I think you and I have a lot to talk about, kid." What was supposed to be a quick apology turned into a heart-to-heart lasting most of the night. Toshi and I split a six-pack as he unloaded about the slow erosion of his marriage, how Candy's emotional and apparently physical affairs were just the final nail in the coffin. Don't get me wrong, I love that woman, he said, sadness weighing down his words. But too much bullshit just piled up over the years, you know? The lack of intimacy, the constant lying, her putting her career before our relationship. I spent way too long making excuses for her behavior. I nodded, feeling for the guy. Toshi seemed like he had a good head on his shoulders. It was pretty clear Candy had been stringing him along for much longer than just our fling. As the night went on, something wild happened. I found myself actually connecting with Toshi, like really connecting. We started riffing on everything from childhood memories to favorite books to stupid quotes from comedy movies. His sense of humor was surprisingly crass but hilarious. And wow, I cannot overstate how insanely attractive this man was. Those brooding Japanese features, the angled jawline, artful bedhead, I actually caught myself staring more than once, quickly looking away like a kid admiring the hot substitute teacher. At one point, I wasn't sure if the slight buzz was from the beers or the fact that I weirdly enjoyed Toshi's company so damn much. All I knew was that I didn't want our bro sesh to end. By the time Toshi and I finished our brovention, it was nearly 3 a.m. We had laughed, vented, bonded, and I'll admit, I may have stolen a few long glances at his ridiculous bone structure. As I rose to leave, something compelled me to blurt out, "Look, man, I know this whole situation is still pretty messed up. But for what it's worth, I'm really glad I got to know the real you tonight." Toshi offered a small smile. "Likewise, kid. Who knew you'd turn out to be halfway decent company?" We shared a chuckle at that. Then, catching me off guard, Toshi pulled me in for a firm bro hug. My face was basically mashed against that glorious mane of jet black hair, and I'm pretty sure I stopped breathing for a second. "Get it together, dude." As I headed for the door, Toshi cleared his throat. "So, we're good then, to keep hanging out like this?" I tried not to visibly react to the wave of stoked relief washing over me. "Why, you man, absolutely, I'd really like that." Toshi gave me a solid nod and a look I couldn't quite read. "Cool, I'll hit you up." So the whole Uber ride home, I kept replaying that hug over and over in my mind. Kept replaying our whole crazy night, if I'm being honest. Why was the thought of seeing Toshi again making me weirdly giddy? By the time I crawled into bed, I knew one thing. I was completely and utterly screwed. Those lingering stares, that buzz of energy around him, there was no denying it anymore. I had a huge freaking crush on my ex-fling's husband. Over the next few weeks, Toshi and I started hanging out more, like a lot more. What started as the occasional bro night over beers quickly ramped up to us making routine plans, hitting the gym together, meeting up for lunch in the park, or just shooting the shit at my... Don't get me wrong, it was all super platonic at first. We'd rag on each other like dudes do, or get hyped analyzing last night's game. Easy, familiar, friend zone type stuff. Except I couldn't stop zoning out mid-convo, mesmerized by the way Toshi's chest subtly strained against his shirts whenever he'd laugh. Or how he'd instinctively rest a hand on my shoulder when making a point, his touch lingering in a way that friends' touches definitely should not. And those gunmetal gray eyes of his, oof, I could get lost in those things for days. I tried not to read into it, tried convincing myself I was just admiring him, you know, the way you might admire a really well-made car, an appreciation of fine craftsmanship and all that. But the wanting looks I kept catching him sending my way told a different story. The moments when our casual roughhousing would blur the line of what's normal between buds. I could have sworn he copped a feel of my bicep once, twice. Maybe I was loco, projecting my insta-crush fantasies onto some poor, freshly divorced guy just looking for a rebound, bro. Or maybe, just maybe, he felt that same crazy, inexplicable spark too. The suspense was killing me either way. I had to know if I was being delusional or not, which meant I needed help from someone with a bit more life experience in this department. My best friend G's had been riding my ass for weeks about this mysterious new guy I kept dodging questions about. As one of the only out lesbians I knew, she definitely had more expertise on navigating uncharted sexual waters than I did. So one night over tequila shots at her place, I finally spilled the whole sordid story. Wait. She held up a manicured hand, eyes wide. "You're catching feelings for the husband?" The guy whose marriage you effed up in the first place? I cringed, sinking deeper into the couch. I know it's really fucked up, right? Believe me, I'm well aware. Dude just shook her head slowly, an impish grin spreading across her face. That's like textbook homoerotic fanfic plot. D, thanks for your sensitivity, I shot back, flicking a throw pillow at her. She easily deflected it, laughing. Oh, I'm just busting your balls, my guy. This is actually pretty huge. Her expression turned serious. So does that mean you're, like, questioning your sexuality, having some untapped curiosity to explore? I worried my lower lip, considering it. Well, I don't know if I'm gay per se. It's just I've never felt anything like this for another dude before. This overwhelming desire to be around Toshi, to make him laugh, I trailed off, cheeks flushed, to shove your tongue down his throat, Jess unhelpfully supplied with a salacious wink. There's no shame in it, bro. You can't help who you crushing on. Letting out a groan, I flopped backwards. It's not that simple, though. Aside from the obvious can of worms of tanking his marriage, there's still so many unknowns. Like, does he even like dudes? Is he straight in just being a supportive friend? Am I projecting some sort of rebound savior complex onto this guy because I feel guilty? Jess mulled it over, taking a swig of her beer. Well, have you tried, putting feelers out there, flirting a bit to gauge his vibe? Dudes can be pretty oblivious, so you might have to spell it out. You say that like it's so easy, I said, running a hand through my hair anxiously. I'm so far out of my element here, Jess. What if I risk the solid friendship and connection we do have by taking that leap? She fixed me with a pointed look. Let me ask you this. What if you don't take that risk and spend the rest of your life wondering what if? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. She had me there. Jess reached over, giving my knee a reassuring shake. Go with your gut on this one, dog. If the vibe is half as electrifying as you described, Toshi's probably picking up the same signals, whether he's fully aware or not yet. You miss every shot you don't take. You dig? With a deep breath, I gave her a resolute nod. Yeah, you're right. I gotta go for it, don't I? She grinned massively. That's my bi-curious boy. Now come on, let's get drunk and celebrate your sexual awakening. It took me a couple of weeks to work up the nerve after my heart-to-heart with Jess. Every time Toshi and I hung out, my stomach would twist into knots, wondering if today was finally the day I'd test those bi-curious waters. We'd have these borderline flirtatious moments. Him fixing the collar on my shirt with a lingering touch, me cracking an innuendo just to gauge his reaction. But I could never fully read whether he was reciprocating or just obliviously being his usual friendly self. One night, we were binge-watching horror movies at my place, drinking a couple of cold ones as was our ritual. I don't know if it was the third beer or just liquid courage finally kicking in, but I decided to go for broke. Can I, run something by you, man? I piped up during a lull in the movie. Toshi turned to me, that annoyingly perfect beard of his framing ridiculously chiseled features. Yeah, shoot. I took a fortifying swig of beer. Here goes nothing. So, you know how we've gotten pretty tight lately, like probably tighter than either of us expected after, the whole sordid start of all this. He let out a low chuckle. You could say that, yeah. Well, I don't know if it's just me, but I briefly averted my eyes, suddenly hyper-aware of how warm my face felt. Sometimes I can't help but wonder if there's something more there, more than just friends. The silence seemed to stretch for an eternity. When I finally dared to look at Toshi again, his expression was blank, completely unreadable. Oh God, I'd gone and messed it all up, hadn't I? He was going to kick me out for being a presumptuous perv, and I'd never see that beautifully sculpted face again except to awkwardly avoid it at the grocery store for the rest of my life. Just as I began spiraling, Toshi let out a slow exhale. You mean like a romantic kind of amour? My mouth went dry. I could only manage a jerky nod, like a sedated bobblehead. Toshi opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, clearly weighing his words carefully. Look, Justin, I'm gonna be straight with you, man. You've been an amazing friend to me through all this divorce crap. Like, shockingly amazing when you consider the shitty circumstances. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling heavily. But that's just it. I cherish our friendship, I guess I'm just worried about risking that. Jumping into uncharted territory neither of us has ever explored before. Does that make sense? My heart sank straight through the floor. So that was it, a firm friend-zoning. I plastered on what I hoped was a casual grin. Yeah, man, no, I totally hear you. But Toshi's soft interjection cut me off. Our eyes locked, his gaze suddenly intense in a way that made my groin tighten involuntarily. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't intrigued by that possibility, however unexpected it might be. The air felt electrically charged with tension, like we were frozen in this suspended limbo, teetering on the edge of a massive point of no return. Inching fractionally closer, Toshi murmured, "Tell me you feel this insane pull between us two, Justin. That I'm not going crazy here." His hand found my knee, squeezing lightly, reassuringly, like he instinctively knew just how badly I needed that grounding touch right now. "You're not losing it, man," I rasped, feeling lightheaded. "I feel it. God, do I feel it?" Toshi simply nodded, his gaze burning straight through to my core. Then, abruptly standing, he drained the last of his beer and announced in a tone laced with unspoken promise, "Let's sleep on this, see if we still feel that pull tomorrow. Yeah?" I could only nod dumbly as he retreated to my spare room, every nerve in my body feeling electric, raw with shivery anticipation. I don't think I slept a wink that night, just laid there in a stupor replaying mine and Toshi's loaded conversation on a continuous loop in my head. Had that really just happened? Had I confessed some deeper unspoken feelings, and he didn't immediately shut me down? My mind was a tornado of conflicting thoughts and emotions. Relief at finally getting that out in the open after weeks of inner turmoil, elation at the flicker of reciprocated interest I thought I'd detected behind Toshi's intense gaze, dread that I'd misread everything completely and torpedoed our entire friendship. When the first rays of morning light began filtering through my blinds, I heard the creak of my spare bedroom door. Holding my breath, I listened to Toshi's footsteps pad down the hallway toward the living room. I don't know what possessed me, but I suddenly found myself throwing off my covers and following out there to meet him. He was standing by the patio doors, silhouetted against the soft glow of dawn streaking across the sky. The tousled bedhead and low-slung sweats hanging off his hips made him look like some sort of achingly beautiful piece of artwork. Toshi didn't turn around right away as my footsteps announced my presence. We both seemed to let the heavy silence linger for a beat, charged with uncertainty. Finally, he spoke up without facing me. "Tell me again, Justin." My mouth went dry. "Tell you what, that you feel this pull." His gravelly morning voice sent a shiver skittering down my spine. Shattering the tension, Toshi abruptly spun around to face me, eyes gleaming intensely. "Because I sure as hell feel it. This magnetic force drawing me toward you in ways I can't begin to fully understand yet." Oh wow. All remaining hesitation fled my body as I crossed the room in 3 long strides, backing Toshi up against the glass doors. His chest was heaving slightly, that taut bare torso just begging to be touched. So I did, splaying one hand boldly across his sculpted abs. "You're not alone," I murmured in a low rumble, leaning in close enough for our mouths to damn near graze. "That pull you're feeling. It's like you've somehow awakened this intense craving inside me, man, a hunger I didn't even know I had until recently." Toshi let out a shuddering exhale, his pupils blown wide. "Then what are we waiting for, huh? Let's explore where this goes before I completely lose my mind." And just like that, the taut thread of restraint snapped. I surged forward, capturing his lips in a searing, messy kiss that quickly devolved into a tangle of roaming hands and muffled moans. Who knew Toshi tasted so goddamn good? Like a heady mixture of beer musk and sheer masculine desire. My head was spinning, punch-drunk from the dizzying clash of our stubbled jawlines and dueling tongue. We only broke apart minutes later, gasping and flushed. The naked want smoldering between us was damn near palpable now. That lingering will they or won't they tension replaced by a white-hot certainty. So I panted in a wrecked tone, "I'm gonna go out on a limb and say we both felt that, pull." The wolfish grin slowly spreading across Toshi's face said it all. Grabbing me by the wrist, he started hauling me back toward the bedroom, a deep growl rumbling from his throat. "Oh, I'm just getting started feeling that pull, kid. Get ready to feel it all over." The next few hours were a whirlwind of exploration, frantic, hungry, almost desperate at times. Like we were making up for months of circling each other with lingering stares and unspoken tension. I'll spare you the play-by-play details, But let's just say Toshi was very thorough in teaching me the finer points of being intimate with another man, and I proved to be an enthusiastic pupil, drinking in every musky taste, every velvet caress of skin on skin, every guttural moan torn from his lip. Afterward, we just sort of lay there tangled in the sweat-drenched sheets, chest still heaving. An exhausted but blissed-out fog seemed to cocoon us in that tiny bedroom universe. For those fleeting moments, nothing else in the world mattered except basking in the afterglow. Eventually, though, the hazy euphoria gave way to the crashing reality of what we'd just done, the realization that we'd irrevocably shattered the lines of propriety between us. So Toshi was the first to speak, propping himself up on one-toned forearm. That happened. I let out a raspy attempt at a laugh, still catching my breath. Yeah, no kidding. I'd say we went full tilt into exploring that pool, huh? Meeting my gaze, Toshi worried his lower lip thoughtfully. There was a guarded quality simmering in those steel-gray depths now, almost sheepish, like he was silently weighing how to articulate his next thought. Listen, Justin, what we just did, man, it was unlike anything I've ever experienced. Mind-blowing doesn't even begin to cover it. I felt a tiny flicker of hope spark to life in my chest. Encouraged, he plowed on. But you gotta understand, I'm still processing a lot here. The divorce, rediscovering my identity outside of being some cheated-on chump of a husband. Toshi paused, exhaling heavily, not to mention the whole bombshell of exploring intimacy with another dude for the first time. My smile faded as his words sank in like a lead weight. Suddenly, the tight tangle of our bare limbs felt stifling, claustrophobic almost. Toshi must have sensed the shift because his expression turned regretful. Hey, I'm not saying I regret this or what we just shared. Believe me, I absolutely don't. But his brow knit, like he was struggling to articulate his jumbled feelings. Maybe we're just moving too fast here, you know? Starting off sprinting at a marathon pace when we should be taking things slower. My throat felt impossibly thick as I nodded jerkily. Of course I got it. He just endured the traumatic unraveling of his marriage. Not to mention this whole confusing foray into uncharted intimate territory. Processing that emotional maelstrom wouldn't happen overnight. I hear you, man. I managed in a cracked murmur. We'll take it one day at a time then. Yeah? See where this crazy ride takes us at a pace we're both comfortable with. Yeah. Grateful look Toshi rewarded me with made it impossible to stay disappointed for long. Leaning in, he pressed his lips softly against mine, a simple, anchoring kiss that somehow conveyed so much more than just tentative passion. Breaking apart, he brushed a few tousled strands from my sweat-damp forehead with a tenderness that made my heart lurch. One day at a time sounds perfect, Justin. Lead on. In the weeks after Toshi and I first crossed that intimate line, things were complicated to say the least. We were both still figuring out how to navigate our new dynamic, the endless unspoken questions of what this all meant, how far we were ready to take it, where it could possibly lead. Don't get me wrong, the physical connection between us was electric, mind-blowing even. Toshi awoke a primal hunger in me that I never knew existed, like he'd uncorked some feral, ravenous beast that had been caged away my entire life. Our encounters were raw, messy, uninhibited, all the pent-up tension of our long denial finally combusting in a blaze of tangled limbs and strangled gas. But then there were the quieter moments too, the morning afters where we just lie there, our breathing the only sound piercing that heavy stillness. No words, just existing in that strange limbo together as the rest of the world kept spinning madly on. Sometimes Toshi would trace idle patterns across the rippled terrain of my back, his calloused fingertips raising goose flesh in their wake. Other times I'd find myself just studying him, cataloging every defined line, every intriguing scar, every tiny imperfection that only made him seem more stunningly real. In those languid moments, it almost felt like some unspoken intimacy. We silently shared this closeness that transcended the physical, a bone-deep connection forged from the chaotic crucible of how we'd first met. Two lives that had somehow intersected from vastly different orbits through one really fucked up situation. And maybe that's why whenever Toshi would slip away after our tryst to grab a solitary breather, I could feel the worry worm its way under my skin. That nagging fear he was slowly retreating behind those walled-off emotional barriers again. Because for as boundless as our physical connection felt, Toshi had made it abundantly clear early on, he needed to keep one foot on the brakes. to parse through the tangled wreckage of his collapsed marriage at his own glacial pace. Any premature shoves to recklessly accelerate us toward whatever came next, he'd resist, vehemently, which left me in this constant state of inner tug-of-war. Exhilarated one moment as we shed our boundaries and explored each other's bodies with reckless abandon, then paralyzed with doubt the next, silently agonizing whether I was being fair and tacitly expecting more from Toshi than he was capable of giving right now. I knew I couldn't dare voice these anxieties aloud, not without risking pushing him farther away before he was ready. Not without potentially shattering this fragile thing we were building, then having to confront the mortifying aftermath alone. So I just tried to appreciate whatever incremental slivers of intimacy and affection Toshi could dole out in his own time, steeling myself to be the very picture of chill, emotionally undemanding companionship as we tread this tenuous, uncharted road together one staggering step at a time. No matter how badly I stupidly longed for more, the strain of tiptoeing that tightrope between giving Toshi the space he needed while still nurturing the intimacy slowly blossoming between us. Man, it was starting to really weigh on me. On one hand, I got it. I really did. The guy had been through absolute hell with the dissolution of his marriage. Having the rug ripped out from under him in such a brutally betraying way, of course he'd need ample time and breathing room to process that life-altering trauma before feeling ready to fully invest in whatever this thing was between us. But that didn't make the waiting game any less agonizing at times. Didn't make it suck any less whenever Toshi would instinctively withdraw into himself after we hooked up. That palpable sense of him subconsciously re-erecting the emotional walls to keep me at arm's length, despite the messy physical intimacy we'd just shared. Tried not to read too much into it, to just appreciate whatever morsels of connection he could dole out for the time being. But the radiating afterglow of our encounters never lasted long before the nagging doubts would start creeping back in, chewing away at the back of my mind. Is I being selfish and clinging to hope for something deeper here? Did I risk smothering Toshi's fragile progress if I kept inching for more rather than just being patient and present? Or worse, was I just uselessly pining after some pipe dream scenario where we actually made this work long-term despite the circumstances? My head would spin with the endless mental pacing until I was an anxious wreck, wondering if this uncharted territory we were stumbling through was even sustainable, much less worthwhile. Thankfully, at least I had one grounded voice of reason to run my tangled emotions by. Jess had taken it upon herself to regularly check in since I'd gotten horizontally acclimated with my new man, as she insists on phrasing it. Listen, babe, you got to get out of your own head with this stuff, she insisted one afternoon over margarita pitchers at our favorite hole in the wall. You're totally borrowing trouble, driving yourself crazy over hypotheticals that may never even happen. I snorted, only somewhat mollified as I drained my salt-rimmed glass. Easy for you to say you haven't spent the past 2 months straddling some weird intimacy purgatory with your borderline girlfriend. She arched one sculpted brow at me. Oh, so he's your borderline girlfriend now, huh? Groaning, I planted my face into my palms. You know what I mean? We're something, but that something seems to fall painfully short of what I'm stupidly painting for here. A look of surprising tenderness flitted across Jess's features. Reaching across the rickety tabletop, she gave my hands a consoling squeeze. Babe, I'm gonna need you to listen real close, okay? This whole situation with Toshi is epically bananas as it is. She let out a rueful chuckle. It didn't just upend his world. It upended yours too, in the best possible way from where I'm standing. I blinked at her owlishly, not following. Jess just shook her head with a fond smile. Don't you see, Justin? You spent decades coasting through life, never questioning any of the fundamental stuff like sexuality or who you loved or any of that. Then this beautiful, complicated man came crashing into your world like a damn meteor and blew everything you thought you knew about yourself to smithereens. She gave my hands another emphatic squeeze, holding my gaze intently. So instead of torturing yourself over whether he's ready to dive headfirst into some picture-perfect relationship, why not just revel in the fact that you're finally awake, that you're getting to rewrite your own story however you damn well please from here on out? I opened my mouth, then closed it again as her words sank it heavily. After a long pause, I managed a lopsided grin. Damn, Jesse, you always did have a way of cutting straight through my bullshit, didn't you? She winked exaggeratedly. You know it, babe. Now quit stressing over dude's emotional pace and just appreciate him meeting you wherever you're at right here, right now. The rest will shake itself out in due time, trust me. Leaning back in the creaky patio chair with a resigned sigh, I felt the knot of anxious tension slowly dissolve from my shoulders. Just like that, Jess had realigned my perspective yet again, offering the same sage guidance that made confronting my unruly emotions seem well manageable for once. I'd spent too much time consumed by doubts. It was true. Blind to the bigger epiphany Toshi had inadvertently sparked by shaking up my once neatly constructed reality. Maybe Jess was right. Maybe I needed to stop pressuring myself to have all the damn answers for once. To stop fixating so intensely on whatever endgame myself and Toshi were barreling toward, if any. And just live in this moment. Jess's pep talk ended up being just the reset I needed. Over the next few weeks, I made a conscious effort to start appreciating the present rather than constantly fretting about the future. Instead of swimming in a pit of swirling what-ifs, I let myself really lean into the moments of connection to she. And I did share, no matter how big or small. Like the way his nose would crinkle adorably whenever I'd crack a dumb joke, or how we'd spend entire lazy Sundays doing nothing more than binging awful sci-fi flicks in a nest of blankets, emptying bowls of takeout by the plateful. Simple pleasures, you know, tiny little intimacies that I'd been routinely glossing over out of sheer anxiousness before. And okay, I'll admit, the sex during the stretch somehow grew even hotter, if you can fathom that. Like some dam of pent-up tension had cracked open between us now that I wasn't silently willing our encounters to hurtle us toward relationship-level commitment every time. Oshi seemed to instinctively sense the shift in my energy too. Where our pillow talk used to be plagued by stretches of heavy silence, now it flowed easily with languid inside jokes and drowsy philosophizing as we came down from our highs, and his touches out in the real world, the casual arm around my shoulders, the low whispered looking good today. Kid, they all carried a warmth I'd previously been too wrapped up in my own head to fully receive. We were connecting, truly connecting as friends, as lovers, as whatever was blooming beautifully between us. Divorced from any rigid labels or lofty expectations, just being. Which isn't to say the occasional worry didn't rear its head. Like when Toshi would abruptly pull away mid-kiss, shoulders tensing up as some invisible emotional barrier slammed shut once more. Or whenever memory flashes of his ex-wife Candy would flit across his chiseled features, momentarily dousing that playful spark in his eye. But I tried not to flinch or recoil from those moments. As much as my stupidly romantic side might ache, Toshi was healing, processing a complex brew of tangled baggage left over from his marriage's demise, feelings I could never pretend to fully comprehend. My role was to just hold space for him, remind him through my steadfast presence that I wasn't going anywhere, regardless of the setbacks or steps backward we might continue stumbling through during this ungraceful journey of ours. Besides, I'd come to realize there were plenty of lighter moments laced through that darker emotional turbulence, too. Moments I never wanted to miss out on by staying preoccupied with trying to solve everything. It's like the pure awe I felt seeing Toshi curled up on the couch after a late shift, furrowed brow finally smoothed in repose while some cerebral documentary played at low volume. How adorably rumpled his hair stuck up at wild angles when he'd emerge sleep-tousled from my bedroom each morning. Or the way his full-body laugh would reverberate through the entire apartment, deep and earthy and unrestrained, whenever I delivered an expertly timed wisecrack. These were the flashes of brightness piercing through Toshi's understandable shadowed spots, reminding me just how breathtakingly alive and singular and wonderful this man was, and how lucky I felt to be allowed such an unguarded window into his soul, regardless of where this unconventional relationship might or might not end up. I was present for those jewel-glinting moments now, soaking up every last drop of them rather than filtering our connection through the warped lens of my previously narrow expectations, living in the right here, right now with Toshi wherever that was meant to lead. And sure, sometimes that intoxicating newness would hit me unawares, like the night I awoke to Toshi's arm draped heavily across my bare chest, our bodies slotted together with that seamless intimacy you only see captured in romance movies. As his deep, rugged snores rumbled against the back of my neck, I found myself biting back a giddy grin, feeling almost lightheaded with disbelief over how this had somehow become my reality. Not from a place of worry or wanting more, but just being able to soak in this unbelievable man's presence against the warm cocoon of our bed, the rest of the world kept at bay. In moments like those, nothing else mattered. Only him and I and the fragile, beautiful thing steadily taking root between us, coaxed along by infinite care on both our ends. No expectations, no rigid timelines or pressures for something more. Just being that profound feeling of gratitude for the wild cosmic detour that had crashed Toshi into my path. For the open road of self-discovery stretched out before me now, it was enough. More than enough to sustain me through whatever unplannable twists and bends our path together would reveal next. I was home. Whether home ended up lasting a week or a lifetime, I was simply, deliriously home. You know that quote about how the journey is the destination? I used to think that was just some cliched self-help mumbo-jumbo designed to peddle expensive life coaching services. But lying here with Toshi's sleeping form cradled against me, his soft exhales tickling the nape of my neck in that reassuringly familiar rhythm. I finally get it now. This right here, the quiet moments of profound peace stitched through all the madness. This is what it's all about, isn't it? Not the dizzying crush that first bowled me over upon meeting Toshi's ridiculously beautiful face. And definitely not the ego-shattering tailspin of my sexuality being upended in ways I never could have predicted. As intense and life-altering as those emotional tsunamis felt while crashing over me, they've long since ebbed away into distant memory. Instead, it's these simple intimacies that solidified somewhere along the way. The tender glances, the effortless banter, the unspoken language of two souls who've become so inextricably intertwined despite all logic and odds. That's the magical stuff people spend entire lifetimes chasing and grasping for. Yet I somehow stumbled ass backwards into finding with this man, this beautiful, enigmatic, ceaselessly surprising man who barged into my life at the most unexpected crossroads imaginable. And sure, our path toward forging this deep, transcendent connection was littered with setbacks and emotional rock slides, dark, messy growing pains that often felt unsurmountable in the thick of working through them together. Like we were intrepid explorers hacking away at the tangled underbrush of our past with nothing but blind faith to guide us onward. Maybe that's why simply reveling in moments like these, when all the ambient noise of our baggage falls mercifully mute, fills me with such humbling awe and appreciation for just how far we've ventured in our respective journeys to reach the breathtaking clarity of today. Because this feeling right here, inhaling the rich, spicy cedar scent that's become so inextricably entwined with Toshi, feeling the reassuring rise and fall of his chest pressed along the length of my spine, it's not some fluke, some misbegotten intersection of chemistries that'll soon fade with novelty. This is the quiet after a raging storm, the warm embers left glowing once the bonfire has died to cinders. Sturdy, resilient, yet still flickering with newfound possibility. The promise of being able to strike up new flames at any moment simply by stoking the coals and adding more kindling. We fought tooth and nail to carve out this beautifully imperfect balance in the wake of our initial, messy collision. And while I have no idea what unexpected swerves or vistas lie ahead as our nomadic trail stretches ever onward, I've stopped fearing the uncertainty. Instead, I relish it in a chance to keep blazing our unconventional paths side by side, no matter where the winding road ultimately leads us. It's the journey that holds the sweetness now, not the destination. And really, what else could I possibly want out of this crazy life than that? To wake up every morning feeling utterly electrified by the endless question of what new adventures await when your copilot is your literal once-in-a-lifetime dream partner. For a guy who's seen your soul and still pulled you close, choosing to journey together rather than apart, who's walked through the smokiest hollows of your most vulnerable shadows and emerged on the other side with you, brushing off the soot and ash so you can hold one another a little tighter. Most of all, the guy who's taught you to cherish every single sight and detour along the way, rather than sprinting blindly towards some preconceived finish line. To be present, to lead with curiosity and openness, and to never stop seeking out the radiant pockets of beauty tucked within all the chaos. That's the real pot of gold at the end of this wild rainbow, when you get down to it. Not some storybook ideal of the perfect relationship or whatever arbitrary milestone society programs us to chase. No, the real treasure is the pathway itself, splashed with all its gut-wrenching color and heart-skipping spontaneity and raw, weird, wonderful humanity, every high ridge and low valley, charted and appreciated in its rightful time. Because at the end of the day, an extraordinary life like the one I've been granted with Toshi in my arms. It's way too goddamn glorious to simply race through in pursuit of some finish line. I'm going to savor every step, every detour, every moment of getting to wake up and live this breathtaking journey alongside my fellow rambler, no matter where the horizon line eventually takes us next. That's the true destination, nomads for life, riding our own winding trails. And I'm finally at peace with wandering for as long as this wild ride will have me.